Let's welcome Ashley. Ashley and her husband also run our Restore Recovery group, which I don't know if you knew that. There we go.
Well, hello.
Just remember, you got to eat your microphone.
Oh, I have to eat this, okay. Well, thank you guys for coming tonight. I've been praying for you. I know a lot of you have been praying for me, and I thank you for that, but just know that I prayed for you. When Lisa asked me to give my testimony about a month and a half ago, I prayed and I asked God, and I sat at my dining room table and I just wrote it all out, and it felt so therapeutic, it felt great. Thinking I was going to come in here and read that, and every time over the last month and a half that I've tried to get into it, just one thing or another, and I felt like I was supposed to write it, but it was one of those things, I'm like, God, this is my story, and I'm going to tell it, but you know who's going to be here tonight, you know what they need to hear, so I need you to talk. I need you to talk. And people that know me, I'm a planner person, I'm kind of a control freak a little bit, so it's kind of hard for me to just kind of, I would say wing it, but it's not really winging it because it's God talking. So just know that what comes out of my mouth is what you guys need to hear, because I prayed for you, and I prayed that whatever is shared tonight, that you're going to leave here with something. So like Lisa said, we've been here 10 years now. My husband and I are over the recovery ministry. You might also see me in women's ministry and prayer ministry. I love to be involved and I love to help, which is, that's a miracle in itself, because there was a long time that I didn't want anything to do with God. It took a lot to get me here. It took rock bottom to get me here, but I'm thankful for it because it brought me to Jesus. But I'm definitely not the woman today that I used to be, and that's because of Jesus. I'm going to tell you how bad it was, and I'm going to tell you how good it is. So for as long as I can remember, I had struggled with severe crippling anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts. I would literally get these vivid images in my mind of how I was going to do this, almost like fantasizing about doing these things. Just at a very young age, a lot of things happened to me that shouldn't have happened to a child, things that have been said to me or done to me. So there was a root of pain that started really young, like 7 years old. I was molested by a family member. And I was so young that I just knew that it was wrong. And I had mentioned it to my family, and they didn't believe me. And so they just kind of brushed it off, and they wrote it off. And I didn't realize at that time that was like a little plant of rejection. That was probably the first time that I felt rejection, because it's really hard to talk about things like that. I mean, I was just a little girl at the time, but still, even now, things happen to us, and it's just hard to talk about it or ask for help. And when you do that, and then you feel that rejection, or they just, write it off. So that was the first plant of rejection that I felt. And then there was just a lot of things that kind of happened at home. My parents and I had a really, really rough relationship. My dad and I have a really good relationship now, so that's just another thing that God's restored. But in the beginning years, not so much. It was just a combination of alcoholism and, my own choices. But I just remember praying to God as a little girl, and these things that had happened to me, these hurts and things, asking him to save me. And when he didn't remove me from that situation, I started to get angry with him and question if he even heard my prayers or even cared about me. Like, I know now that that's not true, but at that time I didn't have somebody like leading me and guiding me and showing me who Jesus was. So in my mind, I'm like, well, he doesn't care about me. He doesn't love me, because if he did, then he wouldn't allow these things to happen to me. But he was right there with me the whole time. It just took me a long time to see that. So at a pretty young age, I stopped praying. I stopped praying, and I started to find comfort in other things. The attention of men and drinking. I started drinking really, really young, like 12 or 13. And things just really, really went downhill from there. It just I was trying to fill a void that I didn't even know was like God. I didn't know that void was him. I was just trying to fill it with something to feel loved, to feel accepted. But just the wounds that I had were so deep at such a young age. I mean, I had been abused sexually. I've been abused mentally, physically, emotionally. And all of those things are bad, but the emotional abuse, the words, that's one of the toughest things to heal from. Words that people have said, and lies that the enemy had told me for so long. Because of what I went through, the devil took advantage of that. He made me question the way I felt about myself and who I was, and he turned me away from God. He hardened my heart towards God. So after that, like I said, I was trying to fill that void, so I just started drinking and partying and rebelling. I met Andy, actually, my husband now. We've been together like 22 years, but we met at a 420 party. Just kind of I don't know, it sounds dumb, but that's all we were doing at that time. We were like, it's 420, let's have a party. I didn't even really know him, but we've been together pretty much ever since. But we were both like really young, getting into trouble, doing things that we shouldn't do, being pretty careless, what a rebellious teenager would do. But the thing is, when I met Andy, I was very weak and I was very broken. And when Andy came into my life, I made him the king of everything. He was the king of my heart, but that should have been God, not Andy, not a person. Because when we put a person on the pedestal where God is supposed to be, it's not fair to them, for one, because we start putting a really high expectation on that other person to fulfill these voids within us. And we're human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to disappoint you. It's just part of being human. So I had from the very start, just kind of clinging to him for what I should have been clinging to God for. And we would fight a lot because of that. And he was good to me and everything. I put him somewhere he shouldn't have been, and I put a lot of high expectations on him, for sure. We were sexually active from the very beginning, and we were pretty careless in that. And I got pregnant when I was 14 for the first time. And for a long time, I wouldn't talk about it. I actually wouldn't talk about it until I started attending this church, because it was just something that was really hard to talk about, and I never truly forgave myself for it. I was just really afraid, and I always blamed myself, saying I could have fought harder. My parents were like, this is what we're going to do, and I just went along with it. And then later, I just would beat myself up over and over again, thinking that everything bad that happened to me, that I deserved it because of what I had done. And it's also really hard to think about, too, because I got pregnant with my son, Sean, 6 months after that abortion. So if I would have kept that first baby, I wouldn't have him. And he has been such a blessing in my life, and I cannot imagine my life without him. I just can't. And yeah, so that intensified my depression after that. It just got worse. And I was so young, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and I got bullied so bad in school because, I mean, I know it's a little more, I don't want to say common now, but when I got pregnant in school, there was like maybe 2 or 3 of us. And I got bullied pretty bad before that, but when I got pregnant, I remember people asking me if they could see my stomach in the bathroom. Like they wanted me to lift up my shirt and see my pregnant belly. And the ridicule that came with that, and the rejection that came with that, because my friends' parents didn't want them to hang out with me anymore because I was a bad influence. They thought if they hung out with me, then their daughters were going to get pregnant. So, and I was judged everywhere I went. I was even judged by my doctor that delivered my son. And I just always felt that like stamp on my forehead, like this is what you are now. You're that teen pregnancy. You're not going to do anything with your life. You just screwed everything up. You're this, you're that. All these things that people said. So again, another root of rejection from my friends and people everywhere. So I relied on my mother-in-law a lot to help me because I didn't, she was so good with babies. And she was so gracious to help me. I actually lived with her for a while before me and Andy got our first apartment. We were pretty young when we got our first place. We had our own apartment before I was even a senior in high school. And at the time, we thought that was awesome. But we were the party house, and that just basically stemmed into even more partying, like pretty much every day, every weekend, all the time. And that does not help anxiety or depression or, it's a mask. I had some deep gashing wounds, and I was just putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. And I was bleeding, and not just on myself, but everybody around me. And then we get into my 20s. I call it the roaring 20s, not because of like the time area, but it was a pretty dark time in my life. That was the worst, darkest years of my life with the drinking, and I would literally drink to blackout drunk, hoping that I wouldn't wake up. It was that bad. I did not have hope. Nothing. It was just all pain. That's all I knew. Everybody was going to hurt me. Everybody judged me. I was rejected. I thought God turned his back on me, but really I turned my back on him. And another reason I call it the roaring 20s is because I felt like the devil, they say, he prowls around like a roaring lion, waiting for somebody to devour. And he was devouring me. That whole chunk of time. I was, 26 when I walked in the doors here. But that whole first part, was pretty dark. I isolated myself a lot too, which, all I had really wanted was to be seen, or somebody to notice enough to see me, because that was just another wound. I was just wanted to feel loved. But that root of rejection made me isolate myself. I couldn't even really talk to people, and that's why I drank so much, because I literally had to pre-party to even be able to talk to people. Like, I couldn't just have a conversation because I didn't know how. And there was always this thing in the back of my mind saying, they don't care, they don't want to hear what you have to say, you have no voice, and, all lies, but, to somebody that's struggling like that and doesn't have a relationship with God, you're not able to discern that. So yeah, me and Andy continued to party for, a long time, and we had a lot of financial struggles, a lot. I mean, there were several times that we were getting evicted and didn't know where we were going to go or where we were going to live. There were times that we were so broke that I remember having to pawn most of our stuff just to get by. Like, we sold our dining room table one time for $40 just to have 2 dinners. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've lost things and had to start all over or have dinner at my mother-in-law's house because we didn't have any food. And we were always working and trying our best, but we just couldn't get out of this hole that we were in. And then my life changed significantly. January 27, 2014, I came home from work and my mother-in-law was there. And I thought it was kind of weird that she was there. She was sitting on the couch and my husband had informed me that he was leaving. And when I've put him on a pedestal for so long, like that last thing, that like last straw kind of moment, like everything just fell apart and I just couldn't. And I got into my car and I knew what I was going to do. I hit a tree at 75 miles per hour with no seatbelt, intentionally. I should not be here today. I should not be talking to you right now. God saved me multiple times, but that time, I just remember, and you'd think I would have noticed it right at that second, but I didn't. I was still angry with God. I hit that tree, and this car is just filling up with smoke, and I just remember being mad at him, thinking, why? Like, I'm trying to end this. I'm tired of feeling like this and living like this. Where have you been this whole time? Why are you here right now? Why are you saving me right now? And then I was like, geez, I can't even kill myself right. I just remember thinking all of these thoughts. And then I went to the hospital, and even the doctor in the ER said to me, somebody up there must like you. And I was just like, oh, kind of irritated. But, God had planted that, for him to say that to me. Like one more time, like, this is me. So yeah, he had said that to me, and he had said to me, he said, little girl, you better tell me the truth right now, because if you're still feeling like this, then I'm going to put you on Pine Rest. Tell by the tire tracks that there was no, they could tell that I didn't try to stop. So, and I lied to him. I told them that I was just upset and that I was driving too fast so that they would let me go home. I walked out of that hospital with basically just hypothermia and some cuts and scrapes, but barely anything. Nothing broken, nothing internal. Yeah. So I told the doctor that, yep, I was just upset, and then I went home and I had every intention of finishing the job. I had a friend that went home with me, and she literally locked up everything in my house that I could harm myself with. She took out all the knives, all the medication, chemicals, anything she could think of, and she put it in black trash bags and locked it away. I was on suicide watch in my own house. And she stayed with me for a few days, but I didn't eat, I didn't drink. I lost 30 pounds in 3 weeks, and I didn't even know that was possible. And at the same time that all of this happened, we got slapped with an eviction notice because we had, money troubles. So I had to find somewhere to live, and I also lost my grandmother not even a week after the accident. And I remember going to her funeral and somebody telling me that my grandma used to go and lock herself away in her room and pray for me for hours. That she knew this was coming, and she covered me in prayer, and I broke. So if any of you are praying over your loved ones and you're believing for a miracle for them, keep praying, because those prayers do save lives. I really believe my grandma's prayers saved me that night. I do. So after that, just kind of everything falling apart, having to find somewhere to go. Had to put a lot of my things in storage. We had to get rid of our dogs because I didn't know where to go. I couldn't take my dogs with me, and that broke my heart. I got to keep one of them, but just lost everything. That old life, just everything. It was a blessing. It was a good thing, but at the time, it didn't feel like a blessing. It just felt like everything just fell apart. Like my whole world just collapsed, and everything I had ever known was just done and gone. But I remember God speaking to me so powerfully. It was my last night in that house that we shared together. And I just said, God, why did you save me? And he said, I have more for you, my daughter. And I remember literally getting up the next day and putting a plan together for my life. Like, for so long, you can go two ways when you've been abused or you've been through trauma. You can either become a fighter, and you're always fighting and fighting and fighting, or you stop fighting. I stopped fighting for a long time. But after he talked to me, and I really received that, I started fighting for my life again. I started putting a plan together, like how can I keep my job? Looking in the paper for a place to live, packing, doing things like that. Spending more time with my kids, because I didn't share that part, but Sean and Maya lived with my mother-in-law for a long time. They've been with us like 10 or 12 years now, but the younger years of their life, she had guardianship of them. We never lost them or anything like that, but we weren't living the way we should. And they deserve better than that. So I just want to thank you for that. So at this time, I'm trying to build my life back up, and I'm looking for a place to live and praying about, okay, God, what am I going to do now? Where am I going to go, kind of thing. And he just started helping me with the pieces. Because of what I had done, rightfully so, they suspended my license for 6 months because I was deemed mentally unstable. So I had to figure out how I was going to keep my job, get back and forth to work. I told them my car, I didn't have a license. I was required to do 6 months of mandatory counseling. I had a lot of stuff that I had to do, but sometimes that's what you have to do. But God was with me through every step of it. And so I was just kind of trying to put my life back together. And things were getting better. I had found a place, and I started spending more time with the kids, and, just Missy Hartman, you guys know her. I worked with her at the time at Goodwill, her and Paige. And they were such a light in that place that I had never seen. They were just different. And I wanted that. I didn't know how to get it right away, but I don't know, her mom, Missy, would bring me to work and take me home sometimes. And it's just how God puts these people in your life to show you Jesus, to help you, to plant those seeds. Even when you can't see them right away, you're just like, man, why are they being so nice to me? Or they're just happy, or just have hope, or they have joy, and you just want that. You just want that. So he had been putting these people in my life for a long time, and I just hadn't seen it. But I still had a void in my heart because I missed my husband. And I remember praying. I used to pray a lot, God, help me to stop loving him, because he was still away and he was, struggling with drugs. But God had another plan, right? So I had hit my rock bottom, started putting the pieces back together, and then at that time, Andy hit his bottom, and he called me for help. And I wanted to tell him no, because I didn't think that he deserved my help. But God had other plans. So we decided that if we were going to do this, then we were going to do this right this time. And that we had to leave the old life behind, including the old people that we used to hang around. We had to change everything. And that's what we did. It was hard. I'm not going to say it was easy, because boundaries, they're not easy. But you can ask God to help you to maintain them and to uphold them, because it is important who you surround yourself with. It really is. It really is. So we knew that we needed to go to church, that we needed to find God, and that we needed to get sober. And I remember when we walked in this church, it felt like home. You guys accepted us as we were. Like, you didn't see us as like the drug addict or the teen mom or the screw up. You just welcomed us. And that's how God is too. Come as you are. Come as you are. So that's what we did. And we just kept coming. And the devil did not like that very much. I remember my first, probably 2 years coming here. I would get violently sick on Sundays. Physically ill, throwing up, headaches, and my anxiety would be through the roof every single Sunday. And there were a few times in there that I kind of allowed that to keep me from coming, and I stayed home, and then I started learning about spiritual warfare and what that actually is. And so then I was able to discern a little bit better what was actually happening, and so I fought a little harder through it and just started praying through it, and I just kept showing up. Just kept showing up and showing up and showing up. And after consistently pursuing God and coming to church, I started seeing gradual deliverance. I started meeting people here that have been like family, that are family. And that was a big wound that I also had too, because my family was not very close. I spent a lot of time alone, doing a lot of things alone. So it was just one more thing God was blessing me with by putting these people into my life. And for a while, things were going really good. Thought, I'm on this great path. We're seeking God. We're coming to church. It's all good. And then I got another big blow. My mom got really sick. She had been sick for a little while, but it wasn't anything that I thought that she was dying. They had told her that she had, the flu. But she wasn't getting better. And so I said to her one day, I'm like, Mom, something is seriously wrong. You really need to go to the doctor. And I saw a yellowing in her eyes, and I knew right away. I remember driving home one day, and God put it really heavy on my heart to go to my parents' apartment. And I had a key so I could let myself in. At first I drove by, and I'm like, oh, it's probably nothing. But no, that heaviness was like, nope, you need to turn around. So I went to my parents' apartment. My dad was at work, and I let myself in. And when I got there, my mom was pretty close. I called the ambulance, and they took her to the hospital, and the paramedics told me it was the worst case of jaundice they had ever seen. And that if I wouldn't have stopped there, she would have died that day. alone in that apartment. God gave me 10 days with her. They knew right away, and they aerometed her to the Lodgia Hospital. And at that time, I was working 7 days a week, cleaning, getting up at like 2 o'clock in the morning and going to the hospital every day after work. And I just remember asking God, I need to know, are you going to heal her, or is this her time? And I literally heard the song, Thy Will Be Done, every day on my way to work. Every day. And I just knew. I knew. But it took me a little bit to realize that he had given me grace in that, because I hadn't had a really good relationship with my parents. And in that time, in that 10-day frame, he allowed me to make amends with her and to tell her that I forgave her. In that time, I was able to pray with her, and she knew the Lord, so I know that I will see her again. But there was just a lot of things that I got to do that if I wouldn't have stopped there that day, I wouldn't have got to do. So I was grateful for that. I was grateful that he gave me that. So after my mom died, I had another huge void in my heart, because I would always ask, what could have been? I was 28 when I lost my mom. I mean, that just seems way too young. And I just felt like an orphan spirit. Like, when you lose your mom, just takes a huge piece. And I felt myself like spiraling into that depression, like all over again. And then my dad left. He moved to Florida shortly after she died. And I just remember being so angry with him. I can see now that that's probably how he had to deal with it, was to get away or a change of scenery. But I just remember being so angry like feeling that rejection almost all over again. Like, why am I not enough for you to stay here? What about me? What about my kids? Like, why? Because I've seen my dad one time in the last 4 years. And I just had a really hard time forgiving him for that. And, things that had happened when I was a child too. And then my dad got really sick. And he's been sick for probably 3 or 4 years now. But I just felt so helpless because he was so far away. It's so hard to have a sick parent, but especially to have a sick parent that's thousands of miles away. And we didn't have money. I couldn't just pick up and go. And there were so many times that I would get the phone call that this might be the last time that you talk to your dad, or you need to come and say goodbye. And that was really, really hard, going through that for that long, because I couldn't be there. In the back of my mind, I always dreaded, am I going to get that phone call? And then I'm like, God, I need you to help me to forgive him, because I had so much bitterness and stuff that I hadn't really dealt with yet. And I was having such a hard time forgiving all these people in my past that had hurt me. I was like, how can I forgive them? Like, they don't deserve my forgiveness. But I was hurting myself by not doing that, especially when somebody is still doing the things. It's one thing when, you're trying to forgive somebody that hurt you in the past, but it's just in the past. But it's hard to forgive somebody that's still actively doing or inflicting the hurt and the pain. So finally, I had to ask God, I'm going to need you to help me to do this, because I can't do it in my own strength. I need you to help me. I started praying this prayer, and I still pray it today. I said, God, I need you to help me to see them through your eyes and not my own. Because when I looked at them in my own eyes, all I saw was the pain that they inflicted on me. But when I started praying that prayer, I did start seeing them through his eyes. And I saw them as hurt, broken, lost souls that needed a Savior too. And I was able to forgive people for things that most would say are probably unforgivable. And not only was there a healing in me, he also blessed me in those things, because many of these people I've been able to help. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't forgive them. One of those being my dad. He needed me, even though it was over the phone and I couldn't be there in person. I wouldn't have been able to be merciful to him if I hadn't forgiven him. And God blessed me by praying with my dad over the phone. He invited Jesus into his heart, and he allowed me to be the one to pray that prayer with him. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't forgive him. So there's fruit in your forgiveness. There's healing in your forgiveness. So my dad knows the Lord, and God has miraculously healed him. He still has a lot of health battles today, but he is a miracle, because they were telling him no on a liver transplant. My dad has a massive heart attack. He had several things and several times, several surgeries over the course of the last few years that they informed him every time could have, should have, but God. Fruit of prayers. So, I've been on this healing journey for a while now. And it's a journey. It's a journey. But through that, I've been sober. I have joy in my life again, and God has restored everything I've lost and then some in my life. Everything that I lost, things I couldn't even imagine for myself. I mean, I had to press in a lot and surrender a lot, and that was really hard for me. I remember the exact moment I was able to do that for the first time, listening to I Surrender by Hillsong, I think it is, in my living room. Literally begging God to help me to surrender, because when you've been through so much stuff in your life, you've got these walls up and you're just like so in control, or you think that you are anyways. So the thought of releasing that control and letting that go and surrendering to anything but yourself just seems insane. But it's the most freeing thing that you will ever do, is to just surrender. And that's what I do every single day. Every single day. I still get anxious thoughts from time to time. There's still times that, the depression tries to creep its way back in, but it no longer has dominion over my life or me. I know I can call upon Jesus when I have those thoughts or the things start spiraling, and he will come and he will help me. Or I can get in his word and replace the lie with his truth. So I just want you guys to know that there is hope and there is healing in Jesus, and if he can help me overcome everything that he's helped me overcome, he can help you. There is nobody too far from his reach. There's nobody too broken. And God always speaks to me a lot through music. I mean, I've always loved music anyways, but when I was praying for tonight and asking God what he wanted me to say, or, what parts of my story to share, he gave me the song Scars by I Am They. I don't know if you guys have heard that song or not. I'm not going to sing it because I don't want to hurt you. But I will read the lyric that he brought to me. And it says, "Darkest water and deepest pain, I wouldn't trade it for anything, 'cause my brokenness brought me to you. And these wounds are a story that you'll use. So I'm thankful for the scars, 'cause without them I wouldn't know your heart. And I know that they'll always tell of who you are, so forever I'm thankful for the scars. And I am. I am. I'm thankful for every single thing that happened because it brought me to God. I've lived both ways. I've lived a life without Him, and I've lived a life with Him. And I'm telling you, your best day without God is nothing. Your worst day with God, I'll say, is, it's, no matter what I go through, I've reached this point where I'm never turning my back on Him again. I've lived that way. I've had my feet planted in hell. I've been in the pit of darkness and despair. The biggest chunk of my life, the whole first chunk. And He literally ripped me out of that pit. And He set me on a firm foundation. And He calls me to go back in there and rip other people out too. So, I just want to thank you guys for coming tonight and hearing my story. I hope that you got something from this, because I've been praying for you for a long time. I do have a couple cards up here too. If you or somebody you know is struggling with addiction or anxiety or depression and they're looking for help or a support group, because something that's really important is community. To have a safe space to talk about these issues and have somebody encourage you, allow you to talk about the real things that you're struggling with. That was huge for me in my recovery, to be able to talk about the roots of the pain with people that you trust and people that are going to encourage you and tell you about Jesus and point you to scriptures and things like that to help you through them. So.
Ashley, can you tell them when you guys meet on Sundays?
Yes, so Restore Recovery meets the first and the third Sunday of every month. Right after service, we meet in the loft in our other building, and we usually get started about 1 o'clock.
Awesome. Yay, let's give her another hand.